Welcome to the Pantheon Plus Rewind.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 77 of The Rewind, the weekly podcast dedicated to Pantheon Rise of the Fallen, the in-development MMORPG, and the community surrounding it. This week, we'll quickly go over the official monthly content schedule, see what the community thinks about the grind in MMOs, as well as a conversation about item history. We'll check the mailbox and finish it all off with some dark lore from the Dark Myrrh. So get spooky with me, Desrin, and my storied co-host, Theric, as we dive into this hour of Pantheon goodness. We hope you enjoy this week's Rewind. All right, Theric. We both had weeks, right?
Yeah,
busy weeks.
We both had weeks. Yeah, busy and not a lot of time for fun. Just, everything is as usual, work, trying to get some gaming in, trying to do prep for this show and trying to keep up with the Pantheon community. It's a full-time job sometimes, I got to tell you. I have a lot of full-time jobs, apparently. So,
it's almost like, all of us collectively make up, a team that accomplishes larger goals than one person might be able to handle. Especially me.
It's amazing what you can accomplish as a group. I always go back to that, because if we didn't have the people that are, the Pantheon Plus crew and just people in the community, like all this stuff, we couldn't do any of this. I mean, it's just too much for one person or even two or three people. So
yeah,
we've got this team of folks that make this great. So
and it's a growing group too, which I'm super happy about. But speaking of groups.
Nice.
You're gonna like this. So it's raid time. As you can see by the new and improved adventuring party graphic on the screen, courtesy of Sparrow, we had 11 people join up last week. So Sleepless doesn't stand a chance. And so this week we're gonna have Shuriken, the dwarf cleric, Zergjerk, the dwarf rogue, Jason, the Scar Beard Lord, and Honorary Ranger, Redbeard Flynn on the Dark Myrrh Enchanter, Balking Waste on the Dwarf Cleric, Joel Brown on the Scar Shaman, Grogu on the Human Warrior, Crowsinger on the Halfling Druid, Ziplox on the Dark Myrrh Rogue, Sparrow on the Elf Ranger and Honorary Beard Lord.
Nice.
And lastly, Bounty Code on the Human Wizard. Man, what a party.
Yeah, I know. Seriously. Like, we have two honorary multi-classed folks, maybe, if you might put it in D&D terms. I love it.
Multi-classing. Yeah. Well, of course, if you'd like to join the adventuring party for next week, join us on our YouTube premieres and toss out a donation. And if you're new, make sure to put down your Pantheon Racing class for us to put on the graphic. And just another reminder that the Patreon page is now available for those that can't be here for the premiere. If you want an easier method or just want an alternate means to support the show. So, of course, any support is greatly appreciated and helps us not only make a better Pantheon Plus, but also give back to the community. So it's been really humbling how much support you've all given us already. So again, just thank you all.
Absolutely.
All right. Good, quick intro today, right?
Mm-hmm. Getting right to it. I like it.
That's right. We are targeted. So with that, let's get into the VR news and notes.
This week in Visionary Realms news and notes. All right. So one of the weeks where we didn't have any, didn't have a dev stream, didn't have the roundtable, nothing like that. But we did get the upcoming calendar of events for Pantheon stuff for November, which is excellent. So just a quick overview of it. On November 5th, which is coming up on Friday next week, we will have the public release of the Developer Roundtable. This one features Atwa and Madaki answering some customer service and QA type questions from the VIP community, so you'll be able to access that. On November 11th, we'll have the developer live stream as the next VR stream. And this is described as a special 1 hour AMA session with an all-star dev panel. So kind of something different. We haven't really had just a straight up AMA session with the devs, not that I can remember anyway. So we don't know, exactly like where these questions are coming from.
It's going to be there either. It's left wide open, but I think it does confirm that part 2 of our HDRP stream might be coming a little bit later, as I kind of suspected. But, a full AMA, we could get some beans there.
Yeah, I sure hope so. I hope so, because I don't know, like what questions you're going to get. All the usual questions, of course, the timeline questions, but I don't know what sort of, is it just free for all? Anything goes, I guess. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, who's going to be on the panel? What, where the questions are coming from? All that stuff it'll all be revealed on November 11th, I guess. We'll have to wait and see. And then on November 18th, we will get the next monthly newsletter with updates surrounding Pantheon's development. And then again on the November 26th, we will have the next VIP developer roundtable from VR, and where Kilson hosts the monthly chat for the VIPs, where you get to ask the questions of them. Don't know what the theme for that one will be yet, or who will be as Kilson says, the legendary members of VR that'll appear on that VIP stream, but we'll find out. So that's the monthly schedule. That's November is what's in store for November. And so with no official news to go over this week, we went to the official Twitter account of Pantheon MMO. And it was a fun question this week, a community debate question. And one of those ones where people have a lot of interesting opinions. And the question this week was grinds. Whether it's experience, faction, or camping drops, how long do you think is too long for a grind? How long would you expect to focus on something before giving up? So, you're going to get a lot of different answers from folks here because there's just so many factors, like time, how much time do you have available for gaming? What's your investment in the game? What's the value of the reward for the grind? All these things to consider. So I tried to include some sort of different aspects, different angles, and I also tried to include some people that we haven't highlighted before on the show. So I want to bring in some new folks. Yeah. So basically, the question is like, how far are you willing to go to achieve a goal? Like how much grind are you willing to accept? So the first response comes from Skeleton Steve, and he said, players should be able to see tangible progress in every single moderate length session that they play. If I don't feel like I'm making any progress towards a goal or hitting milestones after a couple sessions, it's lost my interest. Disguise the grind and respect the player's time. So a couple good points there, Des. Firstly, what to you, when you say moderate length session, what does that mean to you? Because I think you and I might be a little different here.
If I'm being honest and not like trying to cover up, how long my gaming sessions can be sometimes.
You got to be honest. No, covering up your intense gaming sessions.
I'm thinking like moderate is probably like 3 hours, I think. As far like you wouldn't want to do 3 hours, with a full-time job every day of the week, probably, but I think a lot of people do. So I'm going to say about like 3 hours probably is moderate length.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I mean, for me, that's a weekend. Like that's 3 hours on a Saturday or Sunday is probably average, probably about what I do. During the week, it's not that long because it's the evenings, and my wife and I, we've designated a long time ago which nights are date nights and which nights are gaming nights, right? Solid. So, or whatever she does. I don't know. I'm gaming. I don't know what she does on those nights. But she watches like British crime dramas, I think. But anyway, yeah, a moderate length session for me is probably about 3 hours, and I'm usually maybe less during the week. So I think it's important because everybody has a different amount of time available. And I think this highlights the importance, though, of being able to feel progression. So, what Skeleton Steve here is talking about is like, does it feel like I'm making progress? Even if maybe I'm not in the grand scheme of things, maybe there's something about the experience that allows me to feel that way. And he also mentioned respecting players' time, which I thought is interesting because we had this debate just a few episodes ago when we were talking about things that are missing in modern MMOs, how they have way too much respect for your time. So I think it's interesting, like what they're saying is like, it has to respect your time, but he's saying disguise the grind to do that. And I think that's a good idea. Like you got to, let me ask you, what is disguising the grind? When I say that, what does that mean to you?
See, the first thing that made me think of, and of course I hate to mention, but I did hail one good thing about New World being that like kind of everything that you do gives you something, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's a little bit of disguising the grind, because it does reward you for doing anything. But as some of our like Classes 101 teammates might attest to, it still sometimes feels like you have to grind something, right? To progress. Yeah. And I think what this is saying is just kind of like not making a one road approach, maybe, where it's like, okay, if I want to level, I have to do this, and giving maybe multiple options. That's kind of what I think of.
Yeah. I kind of see it that way too. I see it a little bit. I would just add that, like, if it's being done in the service of something greater. So let's say you're grinding faction, but in addition to the faction that you're gaining or whatever you're trying to do with your faction through that grind, you're also, hoping for a rare drop, right? You're hoping for something to come from something else to come out of the experience other than just what you're grinding for, I guess. Right. Is how I think when I hear disguise it. So yeah, I really like those points from Skeleton Steve, and I think I agree with most of what they're saying there. So why don't you grab the next one here?
Yeah. Next one we've got is from Rykoth. They say, grind is a dirty word if it is mindless. Grind in and of itself isn't fun, and games should be fun. Experience, faction, drops. If you must grind, give it weight, story, background, interactivity. If it's fun, length doesn't matter. If it isn't, long grinds are game killers.
Yeah.
Man, this actually just immediately like makes me think of BDO, like the high end of BDO, of what it actually is when you kind of hit the end, and it is 100% mindless grind, man. 100%. So
that's brutal, and then see that is completely a killer for me. I can't do things where I feel like, there's no hooks for me. Like there's nothing for me to hook into. If the hook is just look at the pretty flashing lights on the screen, like that's not a hook. Like, or look at my, my big fancy moves, where I'm jumping up in the air and coming down and creating a, smashing my sword into the ground. Like that's not a hook. Like there has to be some purpose to it, and grind just to one end is not enough, because that's, I don't know, like there has to be context to it. So I like what Rykoth's saying here. And like I mentioned earlier on the last one, for me, the drops, I always think of grind like playing a slot machine. People sit there in casinos and play slot machines for hours and hours on end, right? And they're just pulling that lever. I know modern machines, the lever's gone or whatever, but you know what I mean? Like if there's a chance that I could win big in my grind, if there's a chance that I could get some drop or something that is like, gonna set me apart or is super rare, that's a hook. That'll keep me going. Or if there's like a chance that a quest trigger occurs that only occurs once every 24 hours, that kind of thing, that'll keep me going. So I think context is really important.
Yeah, I like what you're saying about like having a reason, basically. Like it can't just be like a one lane thing. Like I'm XPing to level 42 because that's the forward way to go. Like there's got to be something else going on.
I'm not a bot. Don't treat me like a bot, because I can do more than a bot can, like you can't treat your players like that. So I never got to the end game of BDO or high level on BDO. I barely played that game at all. But I've certainly done my share of grinds, mindless grinds, and I know it's just not a fun experience. The next one's from Robert Koganoff, and they said, you also don't want to make things too easy you also don't want to make things too easy to get, but you don't want to make it so that it takes the rest of a person's life to unlock something just to shove bypass transactions in the first place. And I think that brings, an important point into the discussion here as to how grind has, sort of been co-opted by how monetization has kind of and grind have kind of developed together, where they become like a way of bypassing grind is through monetization and these bypass transactions that you can sometimes are available in some games. And sometimes grind is put in just so that they can implement this, right? I think you would agree with me with that. Maybe I'm wrong. But
a lot of people would put it like game developers are now creating problems so that they can offer, microtransaction solutions. It's pretty rampant.
Yeah, so grind is definitely sometimes falls into that category, and I think you look at a lot of like mobile games. Exactly, that's what that's their whole built upon this whole idea of grind it for you. They always try and sell it with like, well, it's not pay to win. You can achieve this in game. Like for 60 hours of grinding, I can maybe achieve that, or I can it's like that you're doing that absolutely doing that on purpose, and it's more than apparent. So grind can be definitely a problem when it's used that way. Why don't you read the next one?
Okay, so we've got Nostalgic, which I just gotta say I love that name. By the way.
It's a cool name, right? Yeah, very cool name, absolutely.
It's just so fitting for like our community too. So they say grinding was what EQ and other MMOs used as a content gap filler, as it was hard enough to have a game operating of its scale. My rose-tinted glasses have fallen off. A grind is good, but I'm 37, 2 kids. If I can't accomplish enough in a play session, it's not a good grind. Man, I've heard this like so many times. I'm older now. I have these like life responsibilities, and I think this kind of goes along with the whole like respecting players' time thing. Where it's true. A lot of us have, used to have more time or used to have more freedom, right? And on one hand, I want to say, yeah, that totally like makes sense. If the population of gamers that is going to be playing, Pantheon, because that's what we're talking about, doesn't have that time anymore. Perhaps the game should at least lean towards the play style that has, the general populace is made of, right? But on the other hand,
I've thought about this a bunch, and I've come to the conclusion that because Pantheon's demographic, I think the demographic that it's going to appeal to the most is an older demographic than is the sort of the latter half of the bell curve, I guess. People getting closer to retirement, not at retirement yet, but in the stage of their careers where they're not putting in 80-hour work weeks anymore. Or maybe they're not putting in the massive amount of hours to build their careers up. They're at the point where they have a little bit more free time. It's closer to when they were in their 20s than it was when they were in their 30s, maybe. I don't know. And I'm just using myself as an example because that's my only point of reference, right? So I don't know. It's interesting. I think what Nostalgic is saying here is one of the points that they made, I think is really interesting, is talking about EQ and how he's saying it used grind to fill content gaps and maybe as a shortcut for design. And I would disagree with that, I think, because I don't feel EQ did grind with this intent. I don't think they put grind in, and EQ was a grind. Don't get me wrong, there definitely was. I feel it was done more with the intent of the social aspect. And again, this gets back to Pantheon, where I think grind is done if it's, what they do in this vein is going to be from the lens of, what makes this a social experience and how can we do this to increase socialization? Because I don't think it was done from a EQ when EQ was being developed. I don't think they were doing it because they were like, well, we just don't have enough content. We just need to put in this
we just need
treadmill
some
for a
time
while
sinks.
for people.
Yeah.
So, but it's an interesting point.
I think the perspective that I have on this is I believe that older games like original EverQuest or even like Ultima, like grinding skills in Ultima was like not
Mm-hmm.
fast. um,
No, it's very slow.
I think it was partly because there's not much frame of reference, right? Like these games were new, so they're like, hey, like let's make it take about this long to accomplish something, and they weren't necessarily thinking. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, any old developers from this time, but like they weren't necessarily thinking about like the millions of people that are going to play for like 14 hours a day,
Yeah.
to do this stuff. I think it was less about the end goal back then, and I don't want to get into too big of a thing, but since we're kind of revolving around this topic, I see it as more of we had less frame of reference back then. When I started playing EverQuest Online Adventures, my brain wasn't set on whatever was at the end at all. Like I was actually just
Yeah.
like excited to like play, in a game, in a world with other people, and that I could like do stuff to like progress my character. But I honestly wasn't thinking about like, how's my build going to be when I'm, at the
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
the end
I
game,
know,
and
right?
stuff like that. It was more just about like enjoying what was in front of you. Uh, and I think that's a perspective that's changed throughout the history of MMOs, where now it's actually about going from beginning to end rather than just beginning to wherever you end up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, just very much different approach now than we used to. And that's, a lot of reasons behind that. But, we look at we look at grinding as being sometimes an obstacle to things, or as being, instead of just looking at it, each experience as being a unique experience, or being something that each game does differently, right? Or what is this game? How are they approaching grind? Why do I grind in this game? What's the grind like in this game? And why do we do that? And we're very much more analytical with our MMOs, and rather than just sort of being in the experience in the moment. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah, it's a good frame of reference. The next one is from Small Door, and they said, my belief stems from my belief in all gaming. The carrot on the stick should last long. Unfortunately, this is different for each person. I love grinding. In EQ, I'd love to just sit in 1 to 2 camps for hours. If it's for experience, it can be an infinite grind. For rewards, as long as it's usable. So, interesting how he says infinite grind if it's for experience. That's certainly on the other end of the spectrum from what we were talking about earlier about just needing a little bit more than that. I can't do that. I get bored. XP gain isn't a big enough carrot for me to really grind. I need something else going on. But it does raise the question that I think it's an interesting question here is, what are the essential qualities of that carrot? Small Door mentions something that's usable, or is it something that's valuable or unique? Like what kind of carrots tempt you when you're grinding, Desrin?
Oh man, usefulness. Actually,
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
the
Like
number one.
long-term usefulness.
Right, and that's like always the goal is how am I going to be available for like the people I play with, So if I'm a healer, how like am I going to become a better healer from, grinding, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And that could
Yep.
be like you said earlier, which are like drops, So if I get something that gives you even just a tiny bit of impact to my goal of being useful, it's gonna feel like it was worth it. That's probably about all I need as far as carrots.
Yeah. 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 And I think keep it simple, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. I think that's what a lot of, the MMO mindset is does this purpose, does something about this make my character better long term? Is it provide something that I can fulfill my role better? So definitely usable, valuable, unique, all those things for me as well.
Yeah.
Why don't you take the next one?
All right. We've got a two-parter here from Zuggy. We've got, as long as the rewards and payoff justifies the activity, the grind is welcome. And then secondarily, we've got, with that being said, I believe that the grind is integral to the very fabric of an MMO and what sets the genre apart from the others. Reward the player within moderation based on said grind. Learn the lessons from the modern day MMOs and refrain from mindless handouts.
Yes. So like kind of the other at the other end of the spectrum in terms of like the endless grind of Black Desert Online's endgame, there's also the counterpoint of everything just gets handed out, in a lot of MMOs, and there is the anti-grind, there's the fear of grind, which is also a bad thing, because when you're just handing things out, they have no value, there's nothing earned, nothing valuable about it. And
what's funny about that, actually, since we mentioned Black Desert and Endgame Black Desert, the kind of the main reason I quit Black Desert was actually, in spite of the grind, right, was the handouts. I probably spent a good 20-30 minutes a day just collecting the handouts. And I started to feel like, well, I could just do nothing and reach my goal, or I could mindlessly grind and reach my goal. And so I feel this a lot. Like, yeah, I would go out on a limb and say, I don't want anything just given to me without some sort of work. And I say work as in, playtime or, doing something in the game, but like some kind of work to earn it. Because as soon as I didn't earn something, it actually like just makes the whole thing break down for me, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I'm 100% with you on that. And Guild Wars 2 used to drive me crazy with this, where you'd log in, and literally I spent the first 30 minutes every time I'd log in going through all the little gifts that they gave me for, I don't know, for being alive, I guess,
yes.
for maintaining a pulse. Like this is apparently a rewardable activity now. It was so frustrating. And it's like, they make a big deal about it, and they always like little fireworks go off, and your character like it makes some sort of expression like, "Oh, all right." It's like, shut up. It's the worst, and you just, to take it to the next extreme is there's like a whole genre of gaming now about, all these AFK games, like just it's an AFK game. Log in, leave your character there, and come back in 10 hours, and you'll have all this stuff. It's like, what are we doing? Mindless handouts is such a great turnoff for so many people. And I had to go and look at Pantheon's tenets because this relates to Pantheon. Tenet number 11 on the website. I'm going to quote it here. It says, apathy or lack of action should not be rewarded with bonuses. So I don't think we ever have to worry about this in Pantheon. And I really I love this tenet, and I hope it's always maintained, and we are never just given a stupid daily login bonus or some crap like that, because we just don't need it. It's just awful.
Yeah, I think there are definitely other ways to accomplish similar goals, because usually those are framed in a way of helping those that, or making more use of shorter time sessions, right? Like for people like we kind of encountered above, where it's like, I have less time, but I still want to get a certain amount of like enjoyment out of the game. And if those rewards are the enjoyment, I think that's where it starts to really break down. You need to have things in the game that you're only earning from playing the game. And if that's all there is, adding these extra kind of like handout things feels so awkward.
And I hate that it's become so like MMO genre defining, like what Zuggy said there is, grind has become a defining point of MMOs, which is true as well, but also the mindless handouts. And it's really kind of unfortunate that it's gone that way. So
I do like that they point out that it's like, besides being a defining thing, he puts it in like a good light, right? Like it's a genre defining thing in a good way, as in
Mm-hmm.
the grind can be a good representation of a genre where, single player games, you progress by like story. An essential part of an MMO could be the grind. Like that might just be a part of it.
Think of like roguelike games, right? The grind is playing the game over and over and over again and doing the same thing. Like Hades is an amazing game, and you do the same thing over and over again. But so you could consider that a grind. But you're playing the game, and you're also achieving multiple goals along the way. You're doing multiple things and different paths, like you said at the beginning.
Oh, you said very paths, and so I'm like Path of Exile. My brain's already going crazy because I don't think that was on purpose. But yeah, they just launched a new league, and I'm like, oh man, do I really want to go down that road? But yeah, like,
nice.
But it's still like there's something about that actually feels great. Like I have really fond memories of just like throwing music on and playing like Diablo 2 back in the day, or it's like I'm not doing anything, hyper like gameplay wise, like you sometimes you're progressing a story, or nowadays you're probably earning something towards a quest or something like that, but I sometimes it's just a matter of like, hey, I'm playing to hopefully get this drop or whatever, and like that's enough.
Yep. But Agreed. A couple more, and I'll read these ones because they're just the first one's pretty funny. This is from Zergjerk, one of our adventure party members this week. He said, "In my humble opinion, max grind per camp is 4 hours, 42 minutes, 26.9 seconds. After that, it's not fun." So, and then Kilson responded. He said, "Very specific. I like it." So yeah, Zergjerk's bringing the metrics to the conversation.
I love that because that's past our 3 hour mark, so we're basically guaranteed fun in Zergjerk's universe.
Yeah, he's got a longer moderate gaming session metric than we do. That's for sure. And then the most Pantheon responsives of all, I think, comes from our friend Crow Singer, also adventure party member and artwork contributor. And she said, "If I have to grind alone, too long comes pretty soon. If I'm grinding with a group of friends, I can forget how long it's been." And then it's just perfect, right? Just perfect.
Yeah, couldn't agree more.
You really do. Yeah. Yeah, it does. It makes it fun. It makes it enjoyable, and it just makes it takes away all the negative aspects of the grind and keeps the positives. I think a lot of MMOs today forgot about this part of things, and I think that's what we're hoping for. And to sort of philosophize a little bit, like life is a grind, and if you're doing it alone, like it can feel pretty rough sometimes. So whether that's friends, family, pets, whatever, people generally, things when you have company. Some of the harder things in life can be a little easier. So take that for what you will.
That's good.
Thank you very much. So notes though. So that's the VR Twitter. Let's a couple notes from last week that I wanted to mention during the chat. During the premiere, we were graced by VR's very own Adam Tejon Bostel, who is an associate game designer with VR. He was hanging with us in live chat, as various VR people are known to do on occasion. And we were talking about VR's class design update from the newsletter. And if you'll recall, they said all of the classes have undergone a review and a design pass to ensure they're taking advantage of some of the newly available tools to best deliver on promised class fantasies. So when we were talking about this, Adam's done a lot of work in this specific area, and with the Enchanter's spell turn ability being the one that primarily comes to mind, although I'm sure he's done many other stuff, much other stuff. And Adam commented in chat, he said that the sort of the discussion surrounding this that we were having at the time was pretty spot on. He said the adjustments coming in are a combination of being the right window to execute them, and having the tools to execute them quickly. And he said he'd be very curious to hear where the needle falls for us in the community in terms of losing the good in pursuit of the better, which was something that I had said. But internally, they're very stoked for it and they can't wait to show it off. So thanks, Adam, for joining us in chat and showing up. That was great to have you there, and we really appreciate it. And thanks for dropping these little, just not really beans, but more like, just a couple reflections from a VR team member as to how we were discussing this and what we were talking about. So really appreciated that. So just another good reminder, and who knows when they're going to show up. They're just sort of pop in out of the blue. You never know.
And I totally got nervous because, I think that was around the part where I'm kind of making a few assumptions about about their operation. And I hate doing that because, I don't know. And then Tim comes in and I'm like, oh, God.
Yeah, I know, right?
He's
that
going to be
happens
like,
to me
actually.
too. Yeah, I know. I always worry about that too, right? Because I'm like, what did I say here? What did I say here? I'm thinking about what's coming up next in the discussion. Like, if I'd known they were going to be here, I might not have said that, but I joke. But yeah, it's always fun to have them in chat and we appreciate it. And then lastly, mention the Pantheon Plus update. You'll see the weekly schedule on screen for our upcoming content for this week. So definitely check that out. And that is it for this week's VR News and Notes. When the Pantheon community speaks, we listen. So let's dig into the forums and fan projects to see what the discussion's all about.
All right. Kind of an interesting one this week from our good friend Lafael on the official forums. So the thread title is in-game item aggregated data, but don't let that scare you. I think the concept here is actually going to be a lot more familiar for a lot of our listeners, either by experience, they've seen stuff like this before, or maybe they've thought of it before. But Lafael's talking about what I'd boil down to as item history. So some way to keep track of important events regarding items in Pantheon, such as the first person to find or craft it, or the hands that it's been passed through,
right?
Which is interesting because Lafael mentions a mythical character named Elvish Presley as being
Elvish Presley.
I thought that was just such a funny little specific thing, but if I ever see an Elvish Presley
from
in a game, I'm immediately going to know who this is.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Somebody write that down somewhere. It's definitely Lafael.
Yeah. Also adding, this could include things like server or game firsts, but also things like highest damage done by a weapon, or even what that was against or when. He also mentions data on who was the first to reach max level for each class, first to unlock the dungeon, etc., etc. So I'd split this into two things. So you've got the item history. So things I would imagine being you can look at an item somehow and see a lot of things about what's happened to it in the past, or about who has discovered it and that kind of a thing, versus kind of not achievements, but more player stats, right? Where you have server firsts or game firsts and stuff like that.
Right.
So the thread's kind of going to be on a little bit of both here, and you'll see we kind of focus on one. But right off the bat, can you visualize what this might look like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I can see it clearly in my head how this would, I think of it you would pull up the item description and there would be say 3 or 4 tabs at the top, right? You've got the item, the picture, the stats of it, all the important, stuff everybody wants to know right off the hop. But then maybe the 3rd or 4th tab is looted by player name, traded on this date by player name. You're obviously going to have to filter some of this out. It would just be way too much, but I can definitely see an item history page being very interesting. What if you picked up you bought something on the auction house, or you bought something, traded something, and you're just buying it because you know what the item is and you want it. But then you look at its history and it's oh, wait a minute, this was owned by a guildmate of mine, 6 months ago. Somebody else I know had this at one time. And I'm just using that who owned it as one example. There could be a million ththings. I think it's such a cool idea.
Right. That's actually pretty much what I was thinking of too, as far as the item history side of things. The first thing it made me think of was a lot of games have had crafted by blank, right?
Yeah. Like a signature, like a maker's mark kind of thing.
Right. And it's just kind of, to me, this is more of an expansion of that, to be okay, not only is it just going to show who crafted it, but it would be kind of fun to see maybe a raid dropped item, because most things are going to be tradable in Pantheon, right? So
that's the idea.
A big important sword, like I immediately thought of like Moonfell or something, if that's a lootable
nice.
thing.
Yeah, lore
to be like
there.
You scroll to the bottom and it says like originally claimed by Jason the Scarbeard Lord, or not.
Awesome. I like, or maybe like used to slay, like slayed this, raid mob, or slayed this dungeon boss, or even like killed, has been used like this epic weapon, but like used to kill 50 rats, like some obscure stat.
Just kind of interesting, like notable historical things. Like it that like comes across as kind of fun to me. Now he does kind of end with, is this feasible? And sure. I kind of ramble off this a lot in real life, and that's anything's possible with enough time and resources.
Sure. Right? Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
But is this something that works for Pantheon? So we're gonna kind of get into that and see some community responses here. So the first one we've got I do this every time. Dorotea responds to one of the lines in the original post saying, does this kind of data interest us players? So they say, not for me. Speaking for Dorotea, I go in far more heavily for cooperation than competition, and don't really care whether I'm, the first or 100th to do something. Speaking to like, if you're the first to get, a specific item or something like that. Which I feel is more in line with like the player stats, like achievement server first kind of stuff, right? Less the item history.
Yeah. I'm not looking at it from that aspect necessarily. I'm just looking at it as like the biography of the weapon or biography of the item in general, like I'm kind of with them there in terms of that's not my interest in terms of like server firsts. I'm not competitive like that. I'm more into the cool details of something.
Like player generated lore. Kind of.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, hey man, I'm all in for that. You know that.
Yeah. And Vandred actually kind of brought up a good point here. So Vandred right off the bat says, isn't super interested. But he does say there might be some attraction for this with only like specific, very high-end items, but just like not for everything, not for, the cloth armor that you loot from level 2, thing.
Destroyed in 15 minutes of looting. No, we don't. That wouldn't be something.
And so,
that
like,
need to be.
To bring it into focus, right? Like, I think that's a really great narrowing of the idea, right? Is certain items could have like this special attribution to them. So I think I'm on board with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I always confuse myself. So if you watch the Rewind, Vjek or Vjek, just please let me know which one it is, because like I need to know. But they wrote this huge breakdown in their response, which has like a ton of info about like data logging, leaderboards, like how a database like works, and
oh my gosh,
all this stuff. But one thing in the post that kind of stood out to me was he mentioned the EQ2 players stats. And I forget, did you play much EQ2 there?
I did, yeah, and I remember EQ2 players. I remember the SOE. It was on their site. It was part of their sort of infrastructure thing. It was cool.
Yeah, and I actually a lot of my old screenshots were lost because I had stopped playing and they shut down EQ2 players, and I never got those back. But I do remember that system, and WoW had the Armory. Is that similar?
I don't know. I didn't. Yeah, WoW wasn't my thing, but I know Vanguard had
VG players as well. Yeah,
VG players. Yeah, right.
Similar thing. That was kind of I guess product of the time, and I actually always thought that was really neat. But I did notice the criticism that Vjek points out here in saying that if you looked at the stat pages and all the like more server firsty kind of things like that, you noticed a little bit of fishiness. Like I remember specifically, like, was it like the highest damage hit or something was always just some absolutely ridiculous number, and I was always like, wait, what? How is this happening? So in that sense,
I needed to.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I guess it needed to be like curated a little less free form and a little less manipulatable.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where the EQ2 players like stat pages kind of started to break down when stuff kind of was misattributed to players, or maybe even a sign of like cheating, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So in the player stats side of things, I could see that just not really being particularly helpful. But again, like tying this to the original idea, I think we're not talking so much about player stats, We're talking about like tying some, digital thing to a story, in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're talking about, one of Pantheon's tenets is item identity, right? So what we're talking about here is giving items another dimension of identity, not just their look, not just their stats, their damage, their whatever, their DPS. We're talking about giving them another way of developing identity.
Tying themselves to the world. Like, your name would essentially like be on, a certain item forever, or as long as that item exists.
Totally.
So here's where it kind of got a little sobering for me, because I actually can see this, and this is Renarius's post, where he points out some potential issues, as in like players maybe like not wanting that information to be attached to an item, like with their character name and everything.
Right.
How do you feel about that? Because I'm trying to think of, like, I could see just the privacy of it, just people kind of just not wanting, but in a sense, I'm also trying to think of what's the actual negative though? Like,
I don't know. I wouldn't care personally. I don't see it as like, it's not really your data to begin with. It's, this is, you've looted this item, you're using it, whatever, you're walking around doing stuff with it. It's creating a history of the things that the item has accomplished while in your care. It's part of the game, like it would be sort of like saying,
like you want your character's name to just always be like anonymous or something, like,
right.
Like no one, but then it, how are people going to invite you to groups, or how are,
Yeah. There's a digital record of everything your character does in any MMO, and, publicly available. I don't know. If people see me walking around in New World and doing things in New World, I'm not entitled to any sort of privacy from the things I'm doing.
You are playing an online game.
You're playing an online game where the things you do, this is not really something that I would personally worry about. But maybe somebody has a better argument than that for why they would be opposed to it.
That's kind of like where I kind of came to, was I don't see this negatively affecting enough to nix an idea like this, but I'm more than happy to hear if someone like can see this as being a way for like abuse or exploit or anything like that.
Sure.
Because that might be a possibility. But to me, while I think it's a good point, something to consider, like it's definitely a good thing to think about, like players' privacy, but I could see this just being a huge like addition with just very like little negatives other than development time, right? Because this is I would say like a seemingly pretty big feature. And you have to consider like how much benefit it gives. But to me, man, like if I get a drop 3 years into Pantheon from some mob, and I get to see, that item kind of grow and become its own thing. It actually separates it to me from someone that maybe got it on week 1, right?
Yeah, sure.
And
Absolutely.
and vice versa. Like if you come across an item that has a history going back like literally years, it could be just like really exciting and special. All thanks to like, as we imagine, like just a tab on an item.
Yeah.
Just could be just a really neat thing. And I don't think I've ever seen that in any game before.
Yeah, I was trying to think of that. I was asking myself that question too, and I can't say that I have. So if you're listening to this and you know a game that's done something like this, let us know in the comments. Like, turn us on to it, because I'd love to look into, and see how that went over and what the results were and whether people liked it or not, because I think it's a super cool idea.
Yeah. And like I said, a lot of the thread kind of revolves around the achievement side of things, but since I think it was pretty one-sided, like a lot of people really aren't a huge fan of the player stats, achievements, and stuff like that. So we did have a newer member of the community, I think, BitCrunch, noted that crafter can sign their items in a lot of games, like we were talking about before. And Jothany actually kind of confirmed and linked to when Lafael was talking about this, and like Lafael's super on board for a Maker's Mark. So I'm already.
I remember him talking about this. Yeah, I remember the conversations that we've had with him about this, and I know that he would definitely be a proponent of this.
Yeah,
at least with regards to crafting.
Yeah, because like to me, this seems just like the evolution of the Maker's Mark, which has been around since 99, right? Like at least I can't remember if Ultima had the Maker's Mark, but
I want to say it did, but I don't know 100%.
Right. But yeah, like I mean, if Lafael's here for the Maker's Mark, I'm like I feel like he might be into something like this. So I hope this gets a little bit of attention. Honestly, I thought it was a neat idea and something that could be kind of special. And if you guys have your own thoughts and contributions to the idea, feel free to jump in there. I don't want to control what anyone posts or anything, but like it would be pretty cool if this got a little more on track with the item history side rather than the achievement side. Because like I said, it's kind of become a little one-sided, but.
Well, go over to the forums. If you're listening and you're not familiar with the Pantheon forums, go over there and check it out and add your 2 cents to the thread, because that's, the devs read those, and
they do, yeah.
We're not trying to,
even if you hate the
course
system,
of development.
Yeah, even if you hate the idea, totally go in. It's just like I said, it's always hard to see like an original post have like a good idea or potentially good idea, and then like the thread turn into something else, right? Anyway, I just want to do it justice, because Lafael like posts like quite a bit on the forums, and I love that he just like throws stuff out there. So. Anyway, speaking of forums, though, we've got some new faces posting on the Introduce Yourself forum on the official forums as well. We've got Atwa, who, like me, started with EverQuest Online Adventures on PS2, which I thought is just always really neat. We've seen so many EQA people in this community. It's awesome.
Lots of them out there, yeah.
And then they went to DAOC, and then EverQuest 2, and then WoW. A trajectory I feel many are familiar with. And they're planning on playing a warrior in Pantheon. They've been following since the Kickstarter, but kind of lost track of the project for a few years. So welcome back, Atwa. And I have to wonder if the name is a reference to the System of a Down song.
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was totally thinking the same thing. Although I don't know what it means. Like, I don't know if it stands for something. It probably does.
Yeah, because I think on the album it's like all caps or something. So maybe it's an abbreviation.
And they tend to do things like that. Like System of a Down does a lot of like acronyms like that for their songs. They love that kind of stuff. So it probably does. If you know what ATWA stands for, if you're a System of a Down fan, let us know.
Yeah. And then lastly, we've got quite a name here. We've got Big Bad As One. That's 2 Z's and number 1.
I like how you pronounce that's very emphatically to get around any sort of like, coming up like the YouTube picking up a swear or something like
That's
that.
right.
I really appreciate
That's why
that.
we don't curse here. Uh,
No, try not to. Anyway.
so, anyway, they post a quick little quip on the introduce yourself saying they're ready to kick butt, pwn raid bosses, and chew bubble gum.
Nice.
I'm guessing
little,
they are
Duke Nukem reference
yeah,
there.
I'm guessing they're all out of bubble gum, right?
Yeah, all out of bubblegum.
But welcome to the community. Glad you're posted in there. So, but yeah, anyway, that is it for this week's community discussions and introductions.
Mail on a Sunday? That's right. Let's check the mailbox. All right, mailbox. A couple questions in the mailbox, so we'll give these a couple quick answers and go with it from there. We got John Wayne with the first one, and John Wayne said, with the new seamless zones, what do you think this means or changes for how camps in Pantheon will be? They said, I feel finding a spot is going to be just a little more important now that there's no zone lines. And they can see players making different paths and trails that are off the beaten path along the best known camping sites. So interesting question. And I know Desiree, you and I both are just sort of, we're doing this off the cuff. We hadn't really planned out any responses in advance, but my first thought is that we will be using, I think camping is going to be differently located because of escapability. I think escapability now becomes a huge factor in when you decide, is this a good camp? Is this one that's more dangerous? Because if there's no easy way to escape through a zone line, you're going to want to height. Like, let's say you're a camp spot, you're going to be placing your camps or pulling mobs to a spot right next to somewhere that's up high, so you can climb to get an escape route. But I don't know, just off the top of my head, that's my thought.
That's really interesting, because my first thought was it doesn't change it at all unless they're now redesigning the zones to compensate for the seamlessness. In which case, like I said, like verticality, I mean, I would assume we already were going to deal with that, right?
Yeah.
So now it's really just a matter of maybe they can have more areas like that. But I feel like just getting rid of the zone border is not really as major a thing as just how they design the zones in the first place. I feel like camping was, always going to be a thing in Pantheon, will be a thing in Pantheon. And I don't know if just not having borders are going to kind of change that much. So, we'll see though.
I'd be interested to maybe a good question for the, for the upcoming AMA would be when VR discovered that they could, do it without zoning lines and without loading screens between the zones, did they go back and then redesign some zones to accommodate that or in response to that, Because I think this is sort of what this question's kind of getting at is how does it change zone design and how we as players, use those zones now. So I maybe somebody stash that away and bring it up at the, on the dev stream. So it's a good question. And then next one is from Shoddy, my fellow Bears fan, and Shoddy says, "Do you not Bears in general, just Chicago Bears, as you know?" He said, "Do you think the Darkmer starting zone will be an underwater zone, or a bubble underwater, or a seaside foothold, or a landlocked island? What other races do you think could have really unique starting zones based off lore and location?" So I was trying to remember desperately what they've said about the Darkmer starting area, and Cyrenai's Rest is the name of the city, at least on the map. It's on Rainfall, so again, it's not something that we've seen anything in terms of development efforts yet or anything like that, because it's not part of King's Reach and the plan for the roadmap to Alpha. But I do remember them talking a lot about wanting to have that area be unique. Now, I don't know what that means. I don't know what that means, whether that's, underwater completely or sort of somewhere in between. If I had to guess, I'm going to say yes, because Joppa's a big fan of underwater stuff. He's talked about the murky depths and the fear and the exploratory possibilities of underwater zones. So, and I know that, that would be something he would love to see. Whether we see it or not, who knows? If they had their, like you said, Desert, unlimited time and resources, probably, I would say.
Yeah, I feel like if they did make Syrenized Rest a underwater only zone, I think a lot of people would not make Dark Mirror, and like on principle. Like before they even tried swimming, I bet you anything, like a lot of people would reconsider their race. So to me, I think they might go with it. It might be technically underwater, but maybe like an underwater cave system where, you're constantly accessing water and making use of the Dark Mirror's abilities, but it's not technically an underwater, you're not swimming all the time. Personal feelings, though, is I want it to be underwater, because that totally that actually makes the race super unique. And I'm all about the races being unique and their locations being unique, because as soon as like it starts feeling like copy pasta from one race to another, you're just like the same with a different skin. It starts to make you think, like, why did you even put two separate races in, right?
So exactly.
This would be a big way to like get around that, to me.
Yeah, that was a great point, and I agree with you 100% on all of it, because and then you're right. I know Drac would not play a Dark Mirror if it was a starting underwater zone. And you look at our adventuring party. We always have quite a few Dark Mirror in our adventuring party every week, and maybe that might change if it was an underwater zone to start, but who knows? But great question, Shoddy, and look forward. I want to know the answer just as much as you do. So that's the mailbox. Sit back and relax. It's time for the lore you know. All right, lore time. We have a surprise in store for you lore lovers today. But like any good surprise, it's going to remain just that until the moment it arrives. And keeping in the Dark Mirror theme, today we bring you the 3 eyewitness accounts of the death of Sirenai, the Dark Mirror deity. So in this compendium, also known as the Day of Testimonies, we hear the accounts of Amarthus Osir, Lanius Pregrata, and Vethos Ravika as they describe that fateful moment. So pay close attention to the recollection of Vethos Ravika in particular, for reasons which I'll reveal afterwards. But for now, enjoy the words of Pantheon's lore master, JN Gerhart.
As I lay with my face against the sands, I saw the Nytherian guard with their twin tridents grasped for battle, hovering below the surface. In my near paralysis, face half under the water and one eye above, I betook the whole of them in perfect battle formation, firm against the death burning up within their bodies. I saw their skin turn red as the breath dried out of them in the acrid underwater breeze, their pose unyielding as statues. I could only lie still, my body just beginning to lose the deep cold of a life beneath the waves. Yet I could not stop from weeping. From the testimony of Amarthus Osir. I gasped when I saw the first warrior break the surface, the air silent, but for the cry of his assault. Yet soon there were dozens leaping from the surf, all descending upon Sirenai, our lady helpless as her devoted. Helpless as a fish warming on a poacher's deck before he rips it open. Nythir's guard tore into her as if she were a threat, vengeance raw and without gratitude. In their hearts, Sirenai had participated in her own slaughter by violating their bodies, as Mer and as warriors. She had dishonored them, and far too late we understood just how prepared to die our protector brothers had been. These we now call the Nytherian Red, though I have heard the name Dreadmer used as well. I can only attest to the sounds of their savagery, for I could not even move my face as the surf rolled with perfect calm over my nose and mouth, though I dared not drown, for such a twisted fate that would have been. In a few hours, the sun warmed my feet, yet I struggled for months to touch them at all. From the testimony of Lanius Pregrata.
For there he stood, far above us, hovering in the sky. A thing, unlike any I had imagined before. A creature who may have never been made. High in the air, he watched us, writhe. The strange salvation of air filtering through our quivering bodies, heaving out the poisonous liquid of Terminus's oceans. That thing we call Ermos, he in his world, Terminus, gouged us of all we love, turning even the waters against us. Our own people have slain their lady, and before our very eyes, he watched it unfold. Though her blood ran over the sands and even under our very bodies, we could not lift ourselves up from the crimson pools for many hours. That is why curse Ermos is our hail, and Ermos be cursed our depart. For though he departed with not a word, we speak his name to accuse him and testify of his crimes.
From the testimony of Vethos Ravika.
And that's the lore you know. So what did you think of that final entry, Desrin? I know you've heard it and we listened to it. I shared it with you. Anything you noticed about that?
You've gotten a lot better at your female voice.
Yeah, well, you know, I've tried. I've really been working on it. I have to say, I've been really practicing throughout the week. No, we were very lucky this week to have our adventure party ranger Sparrow, an honorary beard lord this week. She volunteered her voice for the lore you know, and I must say she did an amazing job. It was funny because I initially, my intention was I was going to give her like a week to get this done. I'm like, you know what? Not for this week's show. We'll do it for the 1 week after. Like lots of time. Like literally within the hour, she got it back to me and she's like, I did it. I'm like, oh my God, that was so fast. And it was great. You know, it was like pro level recording anyway. And so we won't probably be the last time we hear from her from a lore piece like this because it turned out so well. So thank you, Sparrow, for everything you do for the show. And really appreciate it. But that brings us to the end of episode 77. And Desrin, as well, thank you as always. I really appreciate having you by my side for this fun adventure and all the hard work that you put in each and every week. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
And yeah, as always, thank you to everyone else for hanging out with us today. If you would be so kind as to leave a like for the video or rating on your podcast platform of choice, it does help the show get discovered and get new folks in here in the Pantheon community and grow the community and the show. So with that said, have a great week, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See you, everybody.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Pantheon Plus Rewind. Pantheon Plus is not affiliated with Visionary Realms. Be sure to check out our Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube channels under the name Pantheon Plus. You can follow Theric at Pantheon Theric on Twitter, and Desrin at Desrin Does also on Twitter. And you can stay up to date with all things Pantheon at www.pantheon.plus. Until next time, cheers, and thanks for listening.